Ghost Point for setting the rolling queers. Rolling in for Setting the Record Queer, a podcast where queer people talk about the pursuits and communities they love. This is episode 9, and it's about roller derby. My name's Alexis, my pronouns are it, its, and she, her, and I'm one of your hosts. And our other host is facepalming, but I think I'm hilarious.
My name is Kaylee, my pronouns are she, her, and that was awful.
I love you too. See, they thought it was funny. They think I'm funny.
Who's they? It's just us.
Puns are the oldest form of humor.
I took notes during episode 8 about how to be funny. Like, I have improved as a human being since then. But speaking of things that have happened since episode 8, Kaylee, what has been going on in our lives since episode 8?
Well, we've been planning and working towards and doing stuff for, now that it has actually started today, Power Up with Pride, which we briefly mentioned on the last episode. It's a 4-day speedrunning marathon that's this time benefiting the Trevor Project. It is a big part of the queer speedrunning community, which is super cool. It's personally my favorite marathon that I was gonna, it's like, it's tied for favorite with the other marathons I also work on.
So you can love the RPG Valkyries. It's okay. Yeah, but Power Up with Pride is a really, really good marathon. It's like the queer speedrunning community's marathon. I helped start it back in 2016, and the fact that it has gone from like a $1,000 raised community weekend to last event raised $14,000 and was on like the front page of Twitch and stuff is really cool. Also, the event is going extremely smoothly this time around, knock on wood. And that's really exciting. But yeah, our entire lives for the past couple days and for this weekend are defined entirely by making sure this event doesn't collapse. So we haven't had that much going on. Another fun thing that happened in the past 2 weeks is, so Kaylee and I, we bought each other some holiday presents. And I, during this week, managed to guess what her present was for me, knowing only that it was a roughly video game-shaped thing in a package that came internationally, and knowing a rough price range for it, I guessed that it was Rockman 8 for the Sega Saturn, and I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, I wasn't very happy that you guessed that.
So instead of saving our gift exchange for Christmas time, we were just like, okay, let's do it in the middle of the afternoon on the third day of Hanukkah, I guess.
Well, I mean, we're both Jewish, so...
I mean, yeah, it worked out. It worked out. And I got her a cool, like, headphones headband for sleeping, because those are, like, the two things that we do with our lives. We play video games and we sleep. We're indoor queers, I think, is an accurate representation of our lives. And, almost every episode of this podcast has been about indoor queers, from writing things to video games to researching things.
It's been literally every single one.
Yeah, exactly. It's literally every single episode. So we decided for this episode we were going to change things up, and we got some outdoor queers for this episode. Some outdoor queers who actually just came from the outdoors from their roller derby practice. Hello, you two.
Hello. Although, to be fair, our roller derby practice is actually indoors because it is very cold in Wisconsin right now.
It's the outdoor spirit, though,
Yeah.
It's the spirit of athleticism as opposed to the spirit of just playing video games.
Okay, yeah, that's okay. Fair.
No running involved in speed runnings?
No. I mean, sometimes running back and forth from the tech station when nothing's working correctly, but there was that one time that I was hosting, as in like doing like the MC role for a marathon, but then also was scheduled to be doing an interview at the same time. So I threw, I did a throw from myself as a host to myself as an interview, sprinted across the backstage setup, slammed down on the interview couch, did the interview, then threw back to myself as the host and ran back there. Other than that, it's generally not a physical activity, and I think that was an exception. Anyways, why don't you two introduce yourselves?
Sure. So my actual name is Emily, and I go by Hammer Abby as part of the Madison roller derby. My pronouns are she, her, and I think that about sums me up. So yeah. How about you?
My name is Wendy. I go by Allie Gator in the roller derby world, and my pronouns are also she, her.
There you go. That's us.
So, for context, you two both not only play roller derby, you also do announcing for roller derby, and you two have a podcast about roller derby.
All of those things are accurate. Yeah. So you talk about making quick changes. Although I never announce for games that I skate in, because that would be way too hard to go back and forth and interview myself, which would be sort of egotistical, I think.
You probably wouldn't get staffed for that.
No.
I have skated, though, and gone directly to announce right after. So
yes, I have done that. So yeah, we are both skaters. Allie's been skating a lot longer than I have. How long has it been now?
I'm starting my 12th season.
And I am starting my 6th, 7th? 6th? I can't remember, honestly. And we've both been announcing for a long time as well, because we're both big hams and we like to talk. So it's a nice compliment. And sometimes when you're not skating, you want to talk about skating. So we just love skating. Skating's our favorite.
Yeah. And it's a great community to be a part of. And in all honesty, like it's part of my, I would say, quote unquote, exit strategy from actually competitively skating is to stay involved in the community by announcing.
And then we started the podcast, which is called Something Something Roller Derby, or SSRD. We started that a little over a year ago, so we've got a handful of episodes in the can, really focused on kind of gathering oral histories about the sport and talking about some of the human interest sides of it. So we don't really get into like stats and who won what game or anything. It's more just talking about the community and some of the issues in it and some of the fun history and having lots of fun guests and things like that. So we're super stoked to be on your show, though. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of podcasts where we talk about what people do and have cool guests on, this is Setting the Record Queer, where we talk about what people do with cool guests. Okay, so already diverting from our show notes here, I just thought of a good question. What's up with the nicknames? What's going on here?
So we refer to them as derby names. It's something that existed in roller derby since the modern resurgence, and I would say around 2002, 2003. It definitely started as kind of a campy thing, and it was kind of like you're taking on this alter ego and almost a character on the track. And I think it was also a slightly protective thing as well, that as skaters, sometimes we take on a persona by roller skating and kind of become the person that I think a lot of us never knew we could be.
Well, and it's the protective part of it, I think, is we've legitimately, you don't necessarily want your day job to know about it, or a certain maybe over-enthusiastic fan to know what your real name is and track you down. That's a thing that's actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also a throwback. So derby, started as a very different sport back in the 30s. It was like kind of a race, and then evolved over time through the like 40s, 50s, 60s into much more of a showy kind of pro wrestling, like plan. There'd be fights and like fake fights and stuff like that. And part of that campiness were the names. So when the sort of founders restarted it down in Texas in about 2001, 2002, it was originally much more campy and again, very showy. So they kept the names. And then now the sport's really evolved into a really competitive, real sport. There's no fake fighting. There's no elbows. There's no hair pulling. But there's still a lot of the elements of like campiness and punk rock and all that we do want to hold on to. We want to be a fun sport. We don't want to be just like a traditional, gross, toxic environment that you get with so many other sports, unfortunately. And part of the fun is to like have a cool derby name. And I will say not everybody in derby has one anymore. There's a lot of people who skate under their real names now, especially on the super high level teams. So it's kind of your call. But I love having a derby name. It's fun just to have this sort of other name and presence, and like people call you by it. No, so there's people I don't even know. I forget what their real names are until like Facebook tells me or something.
Yeah, you have like, what is their email address? Oh, Jennifer. Oh,
who's Jennifer?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah. It's really interesting. And, and I think too, that part of it, I would kind of alluded to it, that like I grew up as a musical theater geek. So I was not a super athletic child growing up, but I loved roller skating. And it was really attractive, like the thing of being able to pick a different name. And like Wendy wouldn't necessarily maybe be as outgoing. Wendy is, but it is. But like Wendy might not have the confidence in herself to go out and be this badass blocker. But like through training and stuff, I realized that like I am, and it's kind of a separation. But then you realize over time, oh, it's the same thing.
It's the same person.
But it's an interesting like psychological experiment. So
It's the long and the short of it.
yeah.
I think it's really interesting how that's like kind of the same thing we have in the speedrunning community when we go to our events. It's like, hi, I'm Proto Magical Girl, the cool girl who announces stuff, but then it's also like, hi, I'm Alexis. And it's sort of the same thing whenever real names are involved with anything. It's like, wait, who's Alexis? Oh, it's you. Oh.
Who's Alexis?
Who is Alexis?
Who's Kaylee?
That's a big
I
question.
don't know. That sounds fake.
But I mean, that's just it. Like I played more sports growing up, so I was kind of this weird queer jock. I never really felt like I fit in a lot of them. So derby definitely has a much more greater appeal. Like I feel like I belong and fit. But I also grew up very much. So I'm currently 37 years old. When I first got on the internet in the early 90s, I was on BBSs and IRC and very early AIM and all that good stuff. And like you had handles. And I had friends who were like actual hackers. I pretended that I was, but I was never any good at coding, so that didn't happen. And also I had a Mac, so you can't hack on a Mac. But yeah, having the handle was like this cool thing, and there's some magic in having a cool nickname, and I think that definitely carries over to derby and a lot of other cultures and subcultures.
Yeah.
So how does one get a cool derby nickname?
So back in the day, you used to like, we would go through training and try out, and it was like a big deal that like you didn't get your derby name until like you got drafted to a team. But there's so many different levels of roller derby. We have recreational leagues, we have home teams, we have travel, like very competitive.
We have junior
leagues.
Start as young as like 8 years old.
And so, it's something that I think people choose for themselves. We used to have this huge registration site. You can look and see it now, defunct 2evils.org. You can look up roller derby name registry and look at all the names. There used to be like a gentlewoman's agreement that you would not have the same name as someone else for fear that you would end up like skating against them. And if you wanted to have the same name, you would write to them and you'd say, hey, I live in England. We'll never skate against each other. Can I use your name?
That's not the case anymore.
It isn't. But there still is definitely that kind of respect in the sense that like, I'm not going to take the name Hammurabi if I already know that there's a Hammurabi around. It's kind of a jerk move. But, people for the most part choose their own names. There might be something that's kind of like picked up as a nickname, or someone might come in with like, someone's real name might be Mickey. And so then they might take a name that relates to that. But for me, my name relates to two things. My parents used to bowl league growing up, and they were on a team called the Allie Gators. And I have their old bowling shirts. And so that's Allie Gator. I also have a lot of dental work. So like chomp, chomp, lots of teeth stuff.
That's so, I love it. That's so good.
And then my name Hammurabi is a really nerdy historical reference that I feel like more of the referees get than the skaters, because referees in derby tend to be like your DMs, your GMs, like the people who come out of role playing and really love rules and kind of just overseeing things. So I think they're just totally more nerdy. So
very much so.
Hammurabi is a reference to the Code of Hammurabi, which is the oldest written code of laws in existence, and it's where we get an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth from originally. So my first derby number, we used to be able to use letters in our numbers. That's no longer allowed, but my first derby number was I4I. It is now 141, which kind of works. But yeah, it was that reference, but I figured even if no one got that, Hammer was still like kind of a cool name. But of course, over time, that's been shortened and most people just call me Ham, and that's pretty appropriate to my personality as well. So it works out.
Yeah. And some people change derby names too. They might pick a name and then like a year later, they're like, that just doesn't feel right. Or they find out that someone else is skating under the same name 2 hours away.
Or it turns out to be a kind of problematic, offensive name, and people talk to them about it and maybe encourage them strongly. Or leagues will sometimes have rules too about you can't.
Has to be PG-13 or whatever.
Yep.
So you both touched on this a little, but I'd like to hear a bit more how both of you started getting involved, both in roller derby and how you got into announcing.
Sure. So I started watching roller derby. Madison's league has been around pretty much since the beginning. We were the 5th league to form in the world. So we were part of the original founding of the modern sport of roller derby. And I remember when the games started happening at a tiny roller rink here, I would go and watch. But I was sort of fresh out of college and didn't feel like it was approachable for me to go and dedicate that time. I was also in theater too. I'm a theater nerd, which is tying into how I ended up as an announcer. But it took me years, and then I finally tried out because I had a friend that I worked with at a coffee shop who was on one of the teams, and she sort of demystified the process for me. But I was attracted to it from the start because it was this wonderful combination of, I really love just a challenging, it's a full contact sport. It's a lot of work. It's super fun though, because you're on roller skates, but then you also get to have a cool name, and you can be as unapologetically queer and gender nonconforming. And I saw so many examples of that in the league. I was like, cool, this is finally a sport where I don't have to, try to blend in by having an awkward ponytail if I don't want one.
That Velcro side pony that you've been rocking for so long.
But you can if you want to. It's fine. It just wasn't my thing. So, I grew up playing a lot of softball, and he was like, oh, you have to have long hair. It was terrible. I hated it. Anyway, so I eventually tried out in 2012. I didn't make it the first time through, so I ended up doing the recreational league and got better, and then finally made it onto a team, which is the Quad Squad, one of our home teams. And I now also play for the Dairyland Dolls, which is our travel team. So it's just like, people refer to derby as the gas that fills all available space in your life, and that is very, very true. And I was also looking for other ways to be involved. So when I was kind of working my way up and I wasn't on a travel team yet, this one right here
That's
I'm
me,
pointing, but you can't see that on the podcast, Allie Gator, was doing some announcing, and there's a tournament nearby in Milwaukee called Brouhaha that is very approachable if you're interested in trying something for the first time for announcing or any other volunteer work. So she was like, hey, you should come do this. And I know the person who is the head announcer for this is an amazing human by the name of Val Capone from Chicago, was wrangling it. And Gator was basically like, hey, you should hire this person to do some announcing. She's got a theater and a radio background. And so Val threw me on. I think I announced for 8 games that weekend.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. There's a lot of talking.
Val had to fill a lot of space, and she was like, Is Hammer good? And I was like, she can hold her own. You schedule her as much as you need.
It's just like drinking a lot of tea and honey and hoping for the best. And it's just learning how to not filter anything. So what you see is what comes out of your mouth. And that's a very tricky skill to do well.
Yeah.
So I've been able to learn from a lot of really amazing people like Allie and Val and a lot of other announcers. But how did you get into announcing? And skating, I should say.
Yeah. So way back when I was living in Madison and going to school and kind of going through a divorce all at the same time. Kinda. Yeah. I mean, it was the pre-divorce area. And I found roller derby and was super attracted to it. I had a couple coworkers that skated also on the Quad Squad. So, I was partial to them starting out. And so I started attending bouts and watching and then volunteering. And then when tryouts rolled around in the springtime, I was like, yes, I believe I would like to try this. And again, not a whole lot of athletic background, but through kind of the divorce and regaining control of my life, I, started working out more and lost a bunch of weight, then joined roller derby and lost a bunch more weight and felt very empowered. And pretty much didn't stop skating. I got drafted to the Quad Squad in 2007, I believe, and then skated a season there. And then I tried out for the Dairyland Dolls, our charter travel team that Hammer is a member of, and I skated with them for 8 years as well. And then throughout that as well, I started announcing when we would have bye bouts. So at home we had a couple seasons where we would have a bout off in the season. And
that just means the other home teams would be playing, and one of the home teams would have a day off to just come and help out at the game.
Yeah, we'd have a visiting team come in to play them for the night. And our head announcer at the time, Bam Bam, was really wonderful and reached out and really encouraged me to announce. I have a radio broadcasting background. I went for a few years to radio broadcasting school and then proceeded to say, nah, I ran out of money and I'm going to get married and do something else for a while. So it all comes full circle and comes back around. I started doing all the things derby because like I said, I really love the community and it's a really intoxicating and wonderful sport to be a part of. And it's one of those things where I'm like, hey, I can talk about this thing too. Ooh, that's fun because I can talk pretty. So,
and you get to meet a lot of really interesting people by doing, I mean, skating for sure. And then announcing was this whole other world of folks. And announcing has actually let me do more traveling and meeting more people than I think so far my skating has done. Because I got to go to, for instance, I got to go to Manchester, England earlier this year and announce at the Roller Derby World Cup, which is where 40 odd teams from 40 odd countries come and play against each other in this big sort of fun giant tournament. And so you're working with people from literally all over the world. And I would not have had that opportunity. I'm not qualified for Team USA, but I am qualified for team announcer.
Yes. We all have our skills.
Team announcer is a pretty good team to be on, if I do say so myself.
It is. We agree.
So just a quick note. Bout is the roller derby term for a match then?
Yeah, we either call it a bout or a game. But yeah, that's basically, it's when we play in front of people. It's one or the other. It was traditionally called a bout back in the day. I think there's been some movement to just start calling them games. Match is fine.
If you look at the rule book, they call it a game now, but I will never not call it a bout in my heart.
It's just part of marketing, basically.
Makes sense. So one thing I do want to talk about real quick. So when I, was initially sort of arranging this episode, it was like, okay, so these two play for Madison Roller Derby, which I foolishly assumed was one team, which is very clearly that's not what's going on here. So can you tell us a little bit about kind of what the organization of the roller derby scene is and what your affiliations are?
Sure. I'll try to be as brief as I can, and with the note that every league is different. So Madison Roller Derby is the league, and we are one league. And within that league, we have a recreational team, and that's very open to anybody. We'll train you from the ground up. And then from there, if you want to, you can try out and make it onto one of the 4 home teams, which is Quad Squad, the team that both of us are on. And then we have the Reservoir Dolls, the Unholy Rollers, and the Vaudeville Vixens. We all play each other for funsies in a home season. And then from those 4 teams, if you want to, again, you can try out for the competitive, internationally ranked travel team, which is the Dairyland Dolls, which has a B team as well. And then we also, just to make things extra fun and complicated, have the travel team that is unranked and plays for fun and is open to more people, is Team Unicorn, which is all about sparkles and pie. We literally bring pie to our opponents when we go to play them. It's delightful. So that's the league. And then different leagues have different structures. So not every league will have home teams. They might just be a travel team, just depending on how many people they have. And then when I talk about our internationally ranked Dairyland Dolls, we're part of an organization called the Women's Flat Track Derby Association, the WFTDA. That's sort of like our NFL or NBA, but way cooler and democratically run. And Madison was one of the founding members of the WFTDA back in the day. And they basically provide, consistency. We all get to vote on and decide how the rules evolve over time and put together the rule book, which as a consequence means that our rule book is giant and sprawling. But
we're also a young sport, though. So, the NFL has been around a long time and they're still having rule changes. So, for a sport that is under 15 years old or right around 15 years oldish, it's not unexpected that we'll have rules updates. So.
Yeah. But it's all, the cool thing is it's basically by Derby for Derby. So we, as the Derby community, if you are a member league of the WFTDA, you have a say in all of the decisions about not just rules, but the guiding mission and vision and who we want to partner with. And if we are, for instance, the WFTDA had a brief partnership with ESPN to broadcast our big championship game for a couple of years, and then had so many problems with them treating us pretty poorly that we ended up parting ways with them, even though it was ESPN, big deal. We were like, you know what? No, this doesn't work for us. And we wrote, our leadership wrote an open letter explaining exactly why. Kind of amazing. So someone tried to basically buy out WFTDA for the International Roller Sports Organization. And that was another, it's basically owned by one old white guy. And we were like, nah, it's not how we do things. So bye, thanks.
Yeah.
And it's very cool to be part of an organization like that.
So roller derby has the very specific, surrounding context. It's pretty well known how queer roller derby is. How true is that everything is completely queer? Because that would be awesome.
I'm not going to say everything is 100% queer, but let's say probably a good solid 85%.
We do have straight folks who play.
We let them in too. No, just kidding. I think as a community, because of how it was formed and kind of that rock and roll, punk, DIY, grassroots organization, you had a lot of folks from different communities that just didn't find homes or had kind of disparate homes in different areas and really came together with this really wonderful thing.
It's a sport. It's a community that created a sport instead of a sport that it sponsored a community, which I think is different than a lot of other sports.
Yeah. So, we have folks that are like chemists or people that are teachers or, a whole wide range of
tattoo artists
folks.
Or I'm a writer. And yeah. So
but what I think we do is that we're creating this community that people feel really comfortable in. And kind of a byproduct of that is that it has been very welcoming and very open in that sense.
It was like a lot of the people who started it and founded the leagues were themselves queer. So when you see yourself reflected somewhere already, you don't feel like the token when you showed up.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. I will say, when modern derby started, it was very focused on like, this is a women's sport. And like, there was a very rigid definition of what woman was. And there are still ongoing conflicts and conversations in different leagues, and different people have different ideas about what derby should and shouldn't be. But it has, by and large, moved toward much more inclusivity over time. So, Madison, like, we're very proud. We have a really inclusive non-discrimination policy for who can skate. Basically, like in the league proper, you can identify as basically anything other than a cisgender male, and you are welcome. If you feel like you feel the most comfortable playing in what has traditionally been seen as a women's league, a women's sport, we're happy with people of a wide variety of identities. And then there are men's leagues too, and a lot of those are all gender. Even though they're called men's leagues, they're very inclusive too. So, but you definitely still run into, like, it's super queer and it's very queer friendly, except there are still areas where certain leagues or certain people aren't yet there. And there's still ongoing education, and there are still problems. Like, there are definitely issues that come up with, I will say at the championship game or tournament this year, there were issues with someone from one team dead naming someone on another team, knowing full well that was not their name. And that was an issue. And I think it is being brought before, higher authorities now.
And I've actually heard referees basically saying too, if that is happening on the track, let them know, because that is a penalty.
Right.
Like, that is offensive language, and that can be penalized.
Yeah.
So, I think that people are pretty proactive in that sense. And I think that as a community, it's much more open and welcoming than a lot of things in our society.
Yeah, a lot more.
Yeah.
And we hold ourselves to a higher standard because of it, I think. So,
yeah. But we live in the society that we all live in. Yeah. Darn it.
But yes, it is super queer. We do often field the question if we're out doing like radio spots or whatever with your local shock jocks, like, aren't you just all lesbians? And I'm like, well, there'd be nothing wrong with that if we were, but no, we represent a wide variety of identities and backgrounds. And I think that in itself is queer.
Yeah.
If you're part of that and you're part of that mindset, it's very, very queer inclusive. So it's nice.
Yeah.
And it's so fun because it's like the joke is that you join derby, you get divorced, and you come out. And there is definitely some truth to that for a lot of people.
I know, I've still been joking. I need to make patches of like the ex-wives club. There's a lot of us.
That's awesome. It's really cool to see such like an open, such a queer sport, especially coming from the background I do of like a, her gender sport. I was a swimmer.
Ooh.
So let me tell you, coming out while still being a competitive swimmer as trans was a thing that happened.
Yeah.
It's cool to see sports these days, that the kids are playing, being so much, frankly, just objectively better.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's one of the reasons that my heart grows 10 sizes when we look at junior derby in particular. So a lot of junior derby is all gender, and it usually starts around age 8 and up. So not only is it just, training the next amazing generation of skaters who are coming up and kicking all of our asses, feeling like dinosaurs sometimes. Like, they have cartilage in their knees and it's not fair.
It's so squishy, amazing.
But it's also this really cool environment where you have kids of lots of different gender identities and backgrounds who get to work with each other in this really intense team environment that's very focused on being supportive and like positive reinforcement. Derby very much looks down on coaches who just yell and are mean, or hold you to some ridiculous standard of what you're supposed to look like or do. So I love seeing that come from the ground up, and like kids get a chance to be in this really positive environment where they get to work with kids from, who have different identities, and it's not this weird like, you boys and girls or whatever else. It's just like, no, we're teammates, and this person does amazing things and I help them with that, and vice versa.
Yeah, or this is a really interesting like just social exposure of like you're skating with that person. Oh, that person has 2 moms. Oh, cool. Okay, that's fine. It's so it's just not a thing, I would say, in general, like getting exposed to all these areas and all these different things in life. I mean, I wish it was around so much when I was a child.
Oh my God, yes.
But like I have a niece that's 12 and she did junior derby for a few years before that league up in Minnesota had issues with their practice space. And it was just the most amazing thing to see in terms of like her being able to like find confidence and find her voice and use her body in a positive way and be like, yeah, you're going to fall down, but guess what? Like you fall down, haha, that's fine. You get back up and you keep skating. And like just how valuable of a lesson in like teamwork and failure and success and moving forward. I just think that's so wonderful.
It seems really nice. I'm low-key jealous for myself, like 4 years ago or whatever.
I mean, I'm sad for, adolescent teenage me that I didn't have this, but one of the things that really drives me beyond the skating that I do for myself and the development there and announcing, but I'm also the general manager of the league, and we're starting our first junior league here in Madison, which is thanks to the efforts of many other people. But part of the reason I do this, like I take it really seriously because you realize as soon as you get involved, you're a role model to someone, no pun intended. But how important it is to like have that visibility so that there's this thing that people can show up to, young and old, and be like, oh, people can do this. They can be like that. They can look like that, and they can do this with their bodies, and they can be involved in this thing, and how important it is just for that visibility, but then to really create and improve these spaces so that they exist for younger generations. And then those younger generations can come along and kick butt because, I mean, like the kids are light years ahead of us. Like when I go and work with younger folks, I'm always just like, yeah, you get it. You're already, just light years ahead of even where I am in my understanding of things. So I want you to have this space, and I want you to never think that you deserve anything less or that you should expect anything less.
All right, real quick, I wanna ask a question here that's sort of a throwback to our episode on sewing when I asked a question about our sewists' usage of the word sew, S-O, versus sew, S-E-W. How often do shenanigans ensue involving the word roll?
I mean, it's like an unavoidable. It just you start to not notice it after some point. I mean, if you pointed out all of the puns for roll.
Yeah, you just keep rolling, guys. Come on. I mean, it's unavoidable.
There's a lot of puns in Derby, and a lot of unintentional or intentional innuendo too, I will say.
Innuendos.
talking strategy. It's like, fill that hole. There's a squirter. Get him. Like
square up on their box.
Yeah. It's just, and all of that strategy talk, but it sounds filthy.
Yes.
So yeah, a lot of shenanigans generally with language, I think.
Good.
Yeah.
Keeps us from taking ourselves too seriously sometimes, I think. That's important.
As I sit here wondering if I have to cut that.
Nah, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, I forgot to ask like what your level of
I didn't say nothing
language.
too bad.
I was gonna say that was all PG. We were talking about strategy. It's fine.
We're trained announcers. I know how to walk that line.
You do you.
Anyways,
whatever you guys got to do.
Haley, take us to the next question.
How can someone get started?
I would say look online and look up roller derby in whatever town you live in, or your nearest big town, I would say, and you will find a roller derby league near you. Most roller derby leagues these days either have a recreational league or they have a fresh meat program that's what we call it sometimes, or a new skater program that will start either quarterly or annually or, at certain intervals that you can sign up and do those programs. And, I would say, too, just look and see where your nearest roller rink is. If you want to try roller skating, it is different than ice skating, though. But if you're an ice skater, you will be a good roller skater in like 4 months.
And I'll say, too, if you're not interested in getting hit or giving hits, there's a lot of rules in roller derby for people who don't necessarily want to be a skater, like a player. So if you want to skate but you don't want to get hit, you might be a referee. That might be a really good option for you. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of rules knowledge. And I really love, in particular here in Madison, we have United Derby Officials 608, which is our sort of union name for our officials crew. And they're they're their whole own community. Like they have potlucks and they hang out and they cook amazing food, and it's a whole like friend group, and they're really great. And it's referees, and then we also have non-skating officials. So there's a lot of rules and stats tracking and numbers and cool stuff to help the game run. That's not even on skates that you can volunteer to do. You can help set up the track. You can become an announcer. You can be a photographer. There's a lot of different ways to get involved. So if you're looking to skate, look it up for sure. And then if you're looking for anything else, look up that local league and just be like, hey, I want to volunteer, and I might be interested in this thing or that thing as a strong point, and they will happily take you in and put you to work. And I will say too, one of the cool things about some of those recreational opportunities or the sort of new skater programs, a lot of leagues will have all the gear for you to borrow for the first little while. So if like you don't want to commit to buying skates and all the pads and stuff, like they will let you borrow it and you can try it out basically no cost to see if you dig it or not, and then go from there, because it is not a cheap sport.
Nope.
So it is nice to have that kind of support, and some leagues will have even financial assistance or scholarships and stuff too. But yeah, there's so many ways to get involved, and we love new folks all the time.
I took your advice immediately to test it out, and I just Googled our city, Rochester roller derby, and yeah, there's a lot of resources here just right off the bat.
Yep.
Rochester, Ithaca, right? I think that's Suburbia.
I mean, we are near Ithaca.
Yeah, Ithaca I know has a team. Suburbia is up there. Yeah.
The league was founded in February 2008 by a group of women, including Resident Ava, which is a great name.
Yeah. Yeah.
I met a non-skating official the other day named Betty Jesseret, and it made me really happy.
Ooh, that's good.
That's good.
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite official names was NPC.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
It was so great. Just like, yes.
Yep. Yeah. NPC. And then as another joke, there is a...
It's a THACO.
There's a THACO. Yep. We've got a chaotic neutral. We've got like so many Dungeons and Dragons references.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of good names in Derby. So... and there are leagues, I mean, they're all over the United States, but there are leagues in Canada, there are leagues in Central and South America, there are leagues all over the UK, there's a league in Cairo, Egypt now, there's leagues in Japan, there's tons of leagues in Australia, there's New Zealand, like it is everywhere.
And yeah, as Hammer said, with the Roller Derby World Cup, I mean, I think the first time they held the Roller Derby World Cup, there was like 12 or 16 teams, and now this third iteration, there was 40. So I think it was like 42 teams from 41 countries or something like that. Because here's the cool thing. One of the teams was Team Indigenous, and that was a team made up of people who are indigenous, are members of various First Nations from across the world who all got together and formed this team. And it was the coolest. And they were doing it also to help raise awareness around issues impacting indigenous people, in particular, like the missing and abused indigenous women in North America and the issues around that. So they were using it to like create this platform. And then it was just this beautiful team of people from lots of different parts of the world. And it was one of the coolest things. I mean, I've seen it, one of those, and it's an ongoing campaign and effort around visibility to Indigenous issues in Derby and in sport generally. It's very cool.
I think I actually remember hearing about that from the person who helped arrange this episode, Sarah.
Oh,
Shout outs to
yeah.
you, Sarah. You're great. Thank you for being cool. Okay, so what's coming up for y'all and for like the Madison Roller Derby League and community? Like, what's on the calendar?
Well, our season is kicking off in January. January 19th is our first home team bout. For our 4 home teams, as we previously discussed, we skate a whole home season for the chance to win Leggy, the Leg of Champions, which is a spray-painted mannequin leg with a wheel, like a skate on it. And it is our trophy.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Oh, man, I wish we had our team is 3-time champions or 3-time champions, so we have Leggy. She's not here with us right now.
We can, however...
Oh, I'm sorry, they.
Leggy's a they.
Leggy's a
we
they.
can send you a picture of this trophy, though,
Yes,
I think, if
please.
you want to include
Yes,
it in your...
please. We will put it in the show notes.
It's a great trophy, and it changes a little bit each year depending on who wins it. So yeah, that's we bout basically once a month from January until late April, and we are also hosting a tournament, an invitational tournament that will see our Dairyland Dolls play teams from other cities. And I think even potentially one from outside of the United States is coming. It's called, you'll like this, it's a pun. The name of the tournament is Udder Chaos, spelled Udder.
And that's April, I believe, 5th through the 7th this year.
It's the first weekend in April for sure.
Yeah.
So we're really stoked to host that as well. And then the travel season when that our team goes and plays elsewhere will be over the summer. We're also in the process of fundraising for trying to actually get a venue of our own that we can practice and hold games in. So it'd be like a dedicated roller derby space in Madison. And that's a whole huge project. And I'll make a quick plug. If you want to find out about our season schedule, about the tournament, about how to help us raise money for this venue, we are online at madisonrollerderby.org.
For just a tiny bit of geographical context, Wisconsin is like the dairy state, so that's where like half of those jokes came from. Ufa looking through a cheese window.
Yep.
We like dairy a lot here.
Except me, I'm lactose intolerant.
Oh, too bad.
That sounds rough. I mean, relatable, but rough.
Why is this the second episode in a row where lactose intolerance has come up? How long can we chain this for?
Oh God, it is.
Well, a long time. But just so you know, something I learned through our friendship hammer is that once you age certain cheeses, is it over 2 years or 5 years?
Most cheeses aged past 2 years have no more lactose, and you can eat them if you are only lactose intolerant and not allergic.
Yeah.
Fun fact for your listeners.
So you get one of those like 5-year, 10-year aged cheddars.
Yeah.
You're golden.
And we got some good ones in Wisconsin. So I'm not totally hard up.
Take a Lactaid.
Good to know. Good to know for all of the cheese enthusiasts who are lactose intolerant listening to this podcast. Also, the ones of that extremely specific category who don't already know that extremely specific but extremely relevant fact.
True.
I'm here for you all.
I grew up in Wisconsin and I didn't know it. So.
Well, hey, I didn't, and I didn't either, so. Okay, but let's move into our performance showcase. So, y'all are outdoor queers. Naturally, since this is an audio podcast, we can't just like have you skating for a performance showcase, as cool as that would be. So what we're going to do for this performance showcase, there's going to be kind of two parts to this. First, y'all are going to give us an extremely in-depth explanation of what roller derby is, because like, all I really know is it's a sport that involves skating and tackling, and probably some other stuff, and, you know, teams win and lose, and I'm sure Kaylee knows just about as much. At least now that I've said it. So we have no idea what this sport is. So please, for a performance showcase, please tell us what roller derby is. Like, just go. You have like 30 minutes on the clock. Just go. Not actually that long. Go.
Oh God, no! I don't want to bore people to death. And the one thing you don't ever want to do is ask a derby person to explain roller derby. But as a trained, former PR manager of the league, I can give you the elevator pitch. So the really simple explanation of roller derby is that it is a full contact race on roller skates. The object of the game is to score more points than the other team. You do that by lapping members of the opposing team. That's the really simple overview. If you don't want to know anything else, you can show up at a game and kind of get that. But basically, we're going to get into the weeds a little bit more. You've got teams, and the teams can have usually like up to 20 people on them, but only having 5 people from each team on the track at any given time. And 4 of those people are called blockers. One of them is called a jammer. The jammer is the only person for either team that can score points.
They're like the living ball.
Yeah, because we don't actually have a ball.
No balls in roller derby.
No balls. But the jammer, which is my job, has to basically get past all of the opposing players and then start to lap them. So racing around the track and then getting through that sort of scrum of blockers each time. And I get 1 point for every member of the opposing team that I pass legally upright in bounds, because you have to stay in the boundaries of a track. It's a big oval flat track. And that's the big difference. Like old roller derby that people saw on TV back in the day was on these banked tracks. What's made it like way more approachable and a lot more people have started to do it is because now you just a big flat floor that you can basically lay tape down to outline a track on. And so when you're out there, the blockers are basically playing offense and defense at the exact same time.
So that's my job.
That's Allie's job, so she can talk a little bit about that.
So yeah, as a blocker, we are trying to get our jammer through, trying to stop the other jammer, and then the other 4 blockers from the other team are trying to do the same thing at the same time. So there's a whole host of sort of strategies that you can do in terms of who's on offense and who's on defense. You can go all defense and lock down the other jammer. You can kind of divide and conquer, and you can work in different 2 pairs. And I mean, there's as derby is a really young sport, so are the strategies. And it's really interesting to have skated as long as I have for when it was kind of like the very early days of roller derby, and we just liked going fast and going in circles.
It was straight up just a race.
Yeah, it was
occasional
really
hits.
Yeah, and then, you know, a few years after I started, like people were like, oh, you can stop on the track and move backwards to try to pull cuts. So you can try to create penalty situations for the other jammer, or you can kind of put the almost like a power play in hockey. You can like pull penalties on the other blockers so that they're down players on the track.
When you get a penalty, you have to go sit in the sad place, the penalty box for 30 seconds. You have to be off the track for 30 seconds, and then you can come back out and join your team again.
Yeah, and so what happens is that, so say if we're playing a jam is what, so we'll take one step back.
I was going to say, we have to explain that too. This is, see, I told you, weedy, very weedy. Games are divided into two halves, two 30-minute halves. And within those 30-minute halves, there are basically periods called jams. Jams can last up to 2 minutes, but they can also end early because the first jammer to successfully make their way through the pack once the whistle blows starting a jam gets to be called the lead jammer, and they control time, basically. It's very cool. You become a Time Lord.
They have the strategic capability to call off the jam as long as they do not commit a penalty and lose that magical. So basically, like, if I'm lead jammer and I get through first before the other jammer, that person's still stuck. I get to control whether or not the jam continues to go. So I can give myself all the time in the world to try to score points. And if the other jammer is still stuck, I can just keep doing that because they're not scoring any points against me. It's great. But if the other jammer gets out and is like right on my tail, and I go up and I try to get some points by passing some other blockers, I can basically. There's a hand gesture you make when you tap your hips with your hands that tells the referees that the jam is to be stopped. And they blow the whistles, the jam stops, and it prevents the other jammer from scoring points, ideally, if you time it correctly. You score points through the fourth whistle. So when you tap your hands on your hips as the jammer, the refs are going to blow the whistles. They're going to go tweet, tweet, tweet. Tweet, 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 tweet. So to the fourth whistle. So if you are...
This is really weedy.
I know. I mean, they
weedy.
told us. But like, if Hammer has the opposing jammer right behind her, if she doesn't time it right and she enters the pack, and if that doesn't get called off right away, like that other jammer could like sneak and pick up some points. And so that's always like one of the things we say is like, you keep skating until the fourth whistle.
And it also makes it really exciting for fans because you're watching this very high stress, fast in the moment thing happen. Like, will they be able to sneak points, or will they prevent the other team from scoring any? And I mean, and in the end, it's like a team can win by 1 point. That's the scores can look really big, but it can come down to the wire like that. So you really have to be strategic in all of that. So there's a lot of strategy that's developed over time, and the game's evolved enormously over the years that it's existed, to the point that it's a lot more. The scrums are much tighter. It's a lot less fast moving. It occasionally gets fast again when things kind of blow up, but it's like all of the blockers are working together in what sort of looks like a rugby scrum, if anybody's familiar with that. And you have legal target zones and legal blocking zones as well.
I like to refer to those as the target taco and the blocking burrito. So if you can think of a burrito, you're wrapped on all sides.
Like you're wearing the burrito. The person is wearing the burrito.
Like if I am a living burrito, I can block people with basically from my neck down to my mid-thigh. I can use my front, my sides, my back to block someone. I can't use my arms, like I can't wing my arms around. You get a forearm or you'll get an elbow for that. And I can hit someone on 3 sides. So target taco, meaning I can hit them on the side, I can hit them on the front, I can hit them on the other side, but there's kind of like this strip of space.
No-go zone on
the back because of safety, where I can hit them. So I can use my legal blocking areas to hit their legal target areas.
Yeah. So no elbowing, no tripping.
No high blocks, no blocking with the head.
Yeah, all that stuff. Just all based on safety, basically, and fair play.
Yeah, so the joke of like, oh, do y'all just, just clothesline each other and punch each other? Like, no, you will get ejected from games and you'll probably get suspended for that.
Yeah.
So no.
So that's the kind of the long of the game. There's probably a million other things we could talk about.
Yeah.
Did any of that not make sense? I'm sure.
Or do you have any follow-up questions from just that?
I feel like one thing that's sort of like missing from this image in my head is sort of like, and I know this is going to be really hard to do in an audio medium. If you could give a more sort of like a visual description, or like I guess an audiological description of like the visual layout of like the playing field and the players and where and when and sort of how things tend to move. Like I get the idea of like, okay, people move through blocking lines, but like.
So when the jam starts, everybody lines up so you've got an oval track, and it's like a racetrack. So there's a section in the middle that no one is in except for referees. But then the track itself is what we play on.
There's 2 straightaways and kind of 2 curves.
Yep. So before, like as a jam is getting set, everybody goes out on the track and all lines up. There's a line across the track called the jammer line. The two jammers have to line up directly behind it, basically, and then all of the blockers are right in front of it. And there's some variation to that. I'm not going to get into that yet. Hold on, give it a second. Give it a second. This is because we need the visual here. So the blockers are in front of that, and they are all clumped together because to have a pack, which is a legal definition in Derby, you have to have a pack in order to actually engage with one another. So like you can't, as a blocker, if you're like way away from the rest of your friends, you can't actually engage the jammer. You can't hit or anything like that. So you can't just like chase forever. You have to stay in this blocking scrum to actually do stuff. So the scrum typically starts with the 4 blockers from each team are kind of lined up around in the vicinity of one another, and there's different formations that people will make, and it's that would be difficult to describe, but they're very close to one another. And then the whistle blows to start a jam, and that means everybody starts moving. The jammers go and they basically run into those packs at full force and try to find a hole or outmaneuver or literally just like slam your way through those bodies. And then the blockers are basically holding together in these tight formations to try to stop the jammer, which you can't do by like using your hands. So it's just pressing your bodies together, basically.
Yeah. Or strategically, using, you could be coordinating with your jammer. And so your jammer could be pushing more to the outside. And so drawing the opposing blockers there so that then their offense could line up on the inside and sweep and open up a space. So a lot of Derby can look really chaotic when you're first watching it and you're like, I don't quite know what I'm watching. But as you start watching it, you can kind of pick up on the strategery and you can really see some really amazing like
patterns and strategies and all that, but it takes a minute for sure. So that's the basic overviews. You'll see a track, people will line up on it, kind of get set, and then a whistle will blow, and everybody takes off, and then it's all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, and then like I said, to the first jammer that breaks through, usually if they got through legally and upright and all that good stuff, the referee that's following them will point at them and they'll blow a whistle and go tweet, and they'll hold up an L, which means that they're lead jammer. Which
it doesn't mean they're a loser.
No, it means actually they're the winner. It means that they have the power again to call off the jam. So if you're first new to watching roller derby, watch those jammers and can kind of see those kind of key points happen.
Right.
That'll help kind of cue you into the flow of each jam. So, jammers come around, they score points, they, tap their hips, call off the jam, and the jam ends, and then there's 30 seconds in between. And so there's 30 seconds for a reset for each team to send out 4 new blockers, a new jammer if they want. Some people are cray-cray and they go multiple jams in a row. If you got good endurance, do it. At a higher level, you probably won't see that as much. But home team level, sometimes you will if people are running short. But again, so you'll have a jam. You'll have that 30 seconds in between. You'll have another jam. You'll reset. And there can be some interesting use of like clock stoppages and bench management in terms of watching the clock and points and momentum. Each team gets 3 timeouts per game. They also get an official review per half.
So they can challenge the referees on a penalty call or the lack of a penalty call and see if they can get them to change their minds, which does happen from time to time. Our referees are usually pretty good about being They'll confer with one another at an official review and talk to all the different referees who had eyesight, a line of sight on what happened and discuss it. And sometimes they will admit a mistake, which is, I think, a very cool element. And then we can, you can also, that's a strategy that bench coaches can sort of take advantage of to try to advocate for themselves, basically, and their teams.
Yeah. And sometimes use it to control sometimes a momentum. So if one team gets a huge jam and they put up 20, 25 points in a jam, the other team might call a timeout to try to stop and cool off that momentum and take a breath as their own team, but also to stop the momentum of the other team.
Yeah.
Then there's also kind of a big movement in roller derby too of clock management and not burning all your timeouts before you get too far or too close to the end of the game. Because if you have a really close game and you need to draw out the time on the clock.
Well, you can stop the clock basically.
When you call a timeout.
In roller derby, there's like the master game clock that's always ticking away.
For period clock, if you will.
Yeah, so 30 minutes in each period. And within that, there's the jam clock. And the jam clock is sort of constantly going where it's timing the jam itself, and then there's the 30 seconds between the jam that it's timing as well. So if you get to the point where, you wanna force time to have one more jam before the time on the period clock runs out, you can stop the jam clock and the period clock by calling a timeout.
Yeah.
And then that gives you sort of a refresh, and you can instead of losing that 30 seconds between jams that's eating away at the overall time, you can stop it and like get another jam in at the last minute. So that's why clock management is very important.
And as well, we keep talking about like person getting lead jam or not getting lead jam, but if no one gets a lead jam, the jam automatically goes for 2 minutes. So again, if you're getting close to the end of a game and like you're getting like 5-6 minutes left and you really need to get some more jams in there, you need to be pretty deliberate about when you call those timeouts to try to like stretch the time out. And then also make sure you're leaving yourself enough time where like if stuff just goes to heck and you have a 2-minute jam at the end, but you only left a minute 45 on the period clock, well, kind of your SOL, you're not going to be able to use that timeout that's in your pocket. And maybe you should have used it 3 or 4 minutes ago to try to like make sure that you actually had the time to space that out correctly.
Apropos of nothing, we keep saying jam, and now I really want jam.
I can be a toast later. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Bajampter?
Oh my
On
gosh,
what?
On
that's
Bajampter?
That's an in-joke between the two of us that made it into a rejected version of episode 0 that we've never talked about before.
Oh, was that not actually in episode 0?
No, that's in the original episode 0 we recorded and then said was so bad that we needed to do it again.
What's your opinion on the jams?
I am a big Bajampter fan. Anyways,
Bajampter.
I think one other thing I kind of wanted to clarify was how exactly scoring works.
Yeah.
Yeah, so scoring, both jammers can score. As soon as they make their way legally through the pack the first time, it's called an initial pass. You have to basically get through that pack right off the line when the whistle blows. And then after that, every time you come around on a pass, you can score points as either jammer. You don't have to be lead to score points. And you score 1 point for each member of the opposing team that you successfully pass. And what the refs are looking for is if your hips get past the hips of that opposing blocker. So the refs have to keep track of a lot.
Yeah.
Because you can pass someone and get their point, but then get knocked out of bounds, have to run back, come in legally, and start over again and repass that person. But you don't get an extra point for it. So the referee just has to keep track, like, well, you've already scored that point, but they aren't going to, they basically put their fingers in the air after you've successfully completed the entire pass to show the stats trackers on the sidelines how many points you've just scored on that pass. So you can get up to 4 for passing all 4 of those blockers. But if for some reason one of those blockers is not is down,
no pass, no penalty.
If you get around someone in a way that's not technically legal, but it's not actually a penalty on you,
like you
that's a whole
both went
thing.
out of bounds, but technically you didn't pass that person legally, so you don't get their point.
So you might only get 3 or 2 or whatever. The referee indicates that with their fingers. So they're watching who you pass legally, whose hips you get around, basically, on each pass.
Yeah, and if there are people, as we talked about, the penalty box, so if the jammer can go to the penalty box, but there's also 2 seats reserved for blockers. So you could have, I mean, in theory, you could have more than that, because if you're standing in the penalty box, that means someone else can sit in it. But if you have people in the penalty box, you can still earn those points. So
Ghost points!
They're called ghost points. Ooh! So if Hammer's jamming, and let's say 2 of my teammates, have gone to the box and we're coming around, the first opposing player she passes, she will get their point and any ghost points that are eligible as well.
So anybody who's in the box will get their points too. So I could literally just pass one person on the track before I call it off, but if they've got 2 friends in the box, I actually get to score 3 points. Bing. So there's a lot of fun. And we actually just got rid of, you could, if you lapped the opposing jammer as a jammer, you would get their points. So you could get like a 5-point grand slam, as we would call it as announcers. Mm-hmm. But we just voted to get rid of that because it was a huge pain in the butt for refs to keep track of. For various reasons.
Yeah, and there was a lot of issues with it not getting tracked properly, and it wasn't really making that big of a difference, I would say, in terms of like game outcomes. And if anything, it will help make some of the point spreads tighter for future games and not have such large blowouts. So if you come see a derby bout or match or game, if you come to a game, sometimes you'll see these point spreads that are like 40-point spreads between the two teams, even 60 points. But that is not an insurmountable like spread of points.
Right.
If
a jammer can if the jammer has a really good jam, like if I make multiple passes in one jam, I can score 20, 25, even 30 if I'm really on fire points in one jam. So you could have one really good jam and catch up from a 30-point deficit.
And again, if you get that momentum going and like if the other team gets into penalty trouble and if you're able to pull a penalty on their team and like on their jammer, and so you're in a power jam situation, meaning we are the only team that can score points at the moment.
Because the other jammer did something naughty and they're in the sad place in the penalty box for 30 seconds as well.
So if you get that kind of momentum going, you could get multiple jams in a row where you're able to close those point spreads pretty effectively and pretty fast. And I would say as well for our home team, I would say well known for being a second half team and that we're
sleepy in the first half.
You gotta wake up a little bit. But sometimes teams will get these spreads on us, and it's fine. You just kind of got to keep your head in the game and not let that get to you in terms of like your mental game. That's something that's also really developed in roller derby, I would say, in the last probably like 5+ years of people really being a lot more aware and cognizant and focusing on the mental game of roller derby, because it is such a physical contact sport, but there is such like minutia in the way that you work against people and that you can kind of work against yourself too.
Oh yeah.
So
I've learned a lot about myself physically, but also mentally playing this game. I think it's really challenging, and it's forced me to sort of recognize like what do you have control over versus what you don't have control over to get upset about or to work on, or when you need to step away from something, or when you want to work harder, and like figuring out where your limits are and trying to push them, but also paying attention to your body and when it truly doesn't want to do a thing. And we have some trouble in derby. People get so excited that we push ourselves through injuries that we should not push ourselves through, and that's it's a real thing, because a lot of us don't have any kind of sports, sports training or athletic training backgrounds, and don't have everybody in a league necessarily who has that. So to like explain how our parts work and how they shouldn't work and when we need to take time off and all that. So that's all developing as we go along in the sport, and we're trying to get better about it. Like there's a big concussion awareness campaign right now within the sport to really take that seriously, and we have concussion protocol for anytime someone hits their head or has a really hard fall that is supposed to happen, and you have to sit out for a certain amount of time from a game, even if it turns out you don't have any concussion syndromes, like if you take yourself out for a minute. So there's a lot that's going on where people are really just trying to do the right thing and figure this out and make it safer for people and more supportive and all that. But yeah, you can learn a lot about yourself playing this sport, as it turns out. Not just that you're queer. You can learn that, and then you can learn stuff about your body and about how your brain works. Oh, and I do want to give a plug. I want to mention this before. Allie introduced me to this thing, this concept, but also there's sort of an organization, informal organization in derby called the Spoonies.
Oh yeah.
And Spoonies, as in spoon theory, about if you have like an invisible illness or mental health issue or anything else going on, that you have so many spoons that you start a day with. That's like your energy that you can give to things, and that you always got to make sure that you got one spoon for yourself at all times, right? And like you may start a day with only 3, and you have to try to recognize that low spoons day, all that. So
it took a whole spoon just to figure out what I was going to wear today,
right? So there's this group called Spoonies, and it's a lot of folks who are in derby and have various levels of ability. And I think one of the offshoots of that is the invisible illness group. So I have ulcerative colitis, and I know you have something.
I have EDS, which is a connective tissue disorder.
Yeah. So,
but also like mental health as well. Yep. I have ADHD and OCD as well. And all those things impact people and how they play and how they live.
And so trying to have more awareness of that within derby for our own sakes, to like understand ourselves and how we can interact with the sport in the community, but then trying to get the community to be aware of it, because there's lots of folks in the community who've got all sorts of things going on.
Hashimoto's.
And we try to figure out ways to make it work. And I will say, people like to say roller derby is for everybody. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think there are different aspects of roller derby that are definitely for everybody, but the sport itself, like being a skater, is not necessarily that. But it is far more inclusive. Like, it is more approachable for more bodies and more abilities than some other sports, because I truly do believe that roller skates are the great equalizer. Because there's folks who are claim to be like the clumsiest people, have never played a sport, whatever. You strap 8 wheels to their feet and they do magical things. So yeah, I just wanted to plug that because I think that's a really interesting, cool, and it's been really enlightening element of the sport for myself, just sort of understanding, yeah, there are some days that this stupid stomach condition that I have makes something harder or more difficult, and to be kinder to myself about it, and also to get other people to understand, like, you may not be able to see this happening, but maybe don't assume that I'm just being a slacker or whatever else, and try to get to know each other better and support each other more with whatever you've got going on.
That's really cool. That's super awesome. As a person, as an autistic person, I'm a fan. Okay, I think I have a really good idea of how roller derby works now. Kaylee, do you have any lingering questions?
No, I think it's about time that we move into the listener questions.
Oh,
Listener question.
neat.
Okay, so if you would like to ask questions of our guests, you can email us at settingtherecordqueer@gmail.com. You can get in touch with us on Twitter at strqueercast. You can enter our Discord, which has the short link bit.ly/strqcord. Or apparently, and this is the secret method of delivering questions that I just learned about, and this only applies if you're Alexis's dad, you can text it.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Oh, that's so nice.
My dad texted me a question for this episode. So yeah, if you are my dad, this is the thing you're allowed to do apparently. So my dad, Robert, wants to know what you two think of Kansas City Bomber. In his words, the best roller derby movie ever.
Oh, that doesn't look good.
I'm going to be kind about this. I love the movie. I think it's delightful. This is a 70s era roller derby movie, I want to say. And it is very much about a version of the sport that is not the version of the sport that we play. So it's super fun, campy, like ridiculous. Have you seen it?
I have actually not seen it.
Yeah, it's fun.
I will comment, though, that my friend Casey Bomber, who is an announcer and previous skater in LA, is fantastic, and I'm a great big fan of hers.
That's where her name comes from. It's an homage. So yeah, the Kansas City Bombers was like an old team back in the day. So yeah, fun. But I want to reiterate, because it's always like, that's not what roller derby is anymore, and it's not like bombshell ladies with huge bazooms in revealing clothing. Although sometimes it is, and that's fine.
Those uniforms were pretty fly.
Yeah, but it's much more diverse than that, and it is a serious competitive sport. We're not punching or clotheslining or whatever that happened in that movie.
No hair pulse.
And I don't think it's the best derby movie ever, but this may be a generational thing. There's a lot of really cool movies that have come out more recently. And like, I won't even count Whip It. Like, Whip It's a fun mainstream movie about derby, but even that is much more like the banked track, a little bit more showy. There's like, people get punched in the nose and no one gets penalized for it. And like,
it's early.
Ellen
It's
Page,
early bank
hooray.
track.
Yeah, fine, cool. But like, there's some really cool movies. I'm going to give a special plug. There's a great documentary called In the Turn. And I'm going to plug it because Allie and I are both in it briefly, but also because it's focused on queer roller derby and people who are queer in roller derby. And the sort of through line narrative in it is about a young transgender girl in Canada who sort of discovers derby, but there's no way to get into it around her. And the documentary makers, while they were making it,
They met her
because they got a letter from her mom that was talking about how her little girl was basically suicidal because she lived in this place that like no one really got her. She had no access to anything. She was really closed off after she came out. And then they discovered roller derby, and her kid was like, oh my gosh, there's this place. Is this a sport where I can be myself and I'll be accepted? And she's like, yes. So the documentary filmmakers actually started doing fundraisers, and they raised money to be able to fly this girl and her mom out to a junior derby camp in LA. And there's a whole sequence in the movie where they follow them through this. And it's like one of the most heartwarming, wonderful things you've ever seen in your life. And it's just such a cool project. It was cool to actually get featured in it at all. And then a lot of really other amazing people in it. And it did the festival circuit, and I'm pretty sure you can get it streaming online. So that would be my recommendation for best derby movie.
All right, so that's what my dad should be watching.
Yes.
All right, Dad, you heard it here first. In the Turn.
You heard it, Robert.
Thanks, Dad.
Our next question comes from friend of the show, Christian Borky.
Oh, hey, I remember her.
What is the best mode of encouragement for fans of roller derby? I've been trying to go for a while. Do I make a sign? Do I boo people? What's the general mood?
Signs, yes. Cowbells, yes.
That's a personal favorite, of course.
Personal.
Dairyland dolls.
It's local, but honestly, if you go to other leagues and stuff, there's other leagues that, and especially like UK leagues that have drums, that are really into the cowbells.
They have really great chants and cheers in the UK too.
Chanting is good. I mean, if there's someone you don't like, you can boo them, but I think we're more for like the positive cheering in general.
I try to discourage booing and heckling. I don't feel like that's in the spirit of Derby very much.
But it is interesting. Sometimes you'll have skaters that have names that sound like boo.
That's
like
true.
there's a skater in Portland named Brute. And people will yell Brute, and it sounds like they're booing, but you know in your heart it's
I
not.
was saying the words.
Be like, why are they booing her? Like, no, they're celebrating that jammer.
So yeah, signs and noisemakers, and I shout out to the Minnesota Roll Girls. There is a cheer group, like a fan group there called the Aquaman Army, and they literally have like a hymnal of Derby songs and cheers and stuff that they pass out and lead people in, and it is amazing.
Yeah, and I would say also shout out to Crime City Rollers. They have
From Malmö, Sweden.
Malmö, Sweden. Yes, they have a really fantastic cheering section as well.
Crime
City Rollers, na 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 na. Crime City Rollers, na 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 na. Crime City Rollers.
Ad nauseum.
So good, and so yeah, be a fan. Cheer. Don't be afraid to cheer. If you are usually 18 years or older, you can sit in the trackside seating. So you can
sit at your own risk.
Yeah,
seating?
depending on how, again, the local league is set up and what their space looks like. Sometimes they allow you to sit. There's usually there's the track, then there's a 10-foot barrier or kind of area around that where the referees on the outside will be able to skate. But then there will be a line that you can sit alongside.
If you can handle sitting on a cement floor, you can do that. I recommend bringing
a bleacher seat or something.
Yeah.
One of those. Or sometimes bringing your camping chair, depending again on the league and how their local bouts are set up and their physical facilities are laid out. But yeah, don't
just show up and
find your
holler
favorite
and hoot
team,
and
find your favorite
merch.
skater. Yes, buy merch too and support your local roller derby leagues.
Well, I think that brings us into our final section of the podcast, which is Kaylee's question of the week, wherein I ask.
That one's Kaylee.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, that's me.
I said, I always like
you.
it when you say Kaylee's question of the week as if you're not Kaylee. The
third person.
Okay,
Kaylee's
pulling back
question of the
curtain
week.
here. In some of the early episodes, I just called it my question of the week, which did not sell the branding of this. Yeah.
Yeah, branding is important.
You gotta go for a brand, girl. Yeah.
Yeah, we need to brand. I'm expecting to sell Kaylee's question of the week mugs and t-shirts.
Yep. Get some stickers made.
Yep.
Okay, so Mario Kart-esque item boxes are added around the roller derby rink. Which one item would you add to them?
Like an additional one that doesn't already exist?
It can be one that exists, or it can be something you'd made up.
I mean, immediately I just want to like rocket skates because I think that would be fun in terms of, but also like I think in terms of like Mario Kart, like the ghost one where you can go bloop bloop from one to the other, or
that'd be nice. Like if I could just magically be on the other side of the blockers without actually having to.
Yeah, I'd say either the ghost or the feather, so you can go bring and jump over people, and you could do an extra apex jump.
I was gonna say I already do apex jumps. Thank you very much.
But you'd be able to jump like
really high
over.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah,
I'd get on board with either one of those. I'm trying to think if there's like some sort of creative thing that we could make up that's not already a thing specific to Derby.
Like if you got a fifth blocker. Like if you got that Mario, you hit that box and all of a sudden you have a fifth blocker helping you.
I could just use like extra. I mean, this isn't like a Mario Kart thing, but a gaming thing. I could always use extra hit points.
Yeah.
as the jammer who is frequently getting beat up on.
Hit points?
Hit points.
Or hit points.
Hit points. Hit points I feel like would be a thing too, somehow. Yeah. I mean, that's just the points that we score in the game. So just like magic extra points that I score. You could open that box and you get extra points.
Or, you could always be like, when you hit that thing, all of a sudden the infield turns to lava. That'd be a good one.
That would kill all of our refs.
They're fine. They're magically able to skate on lava.
Okay, so it just hurts anybody who gets hit out of bounds?
Yeah, just to the inside.
Brutal. Brutal.
Could tell I played a little Mario Kart.
Truly bringing the stakes to to roller derby. All right, so what's the final answer?
I would go probably with the ghost one.
That's
That's beneficial to me. So yeah.
Oh, fire flower though. I just realized. Fire flower. No, I'm gonna go with the feather myself.
Okay. Yep. There we go. Final answers.
Kaylee?
See, I would like to see one where someone just gets an actual car for a few seconds.
Yep. I like that. I like where your head's at. It would be so distressing when it happened, but
You wouldn't be able to backblock people though with that car.
oh, so it's like it becomes actual like a smash up derby.
Like demolition derby.
Demolition derby. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah. There was a roller derby game that was released, I want to say around like 2009. I cannot remember the name of it though offhand, but if you look up roller derby video game, there you go, Kaylee. Madison is actually in it. Dairyland Dolls is a team that you can play.
You can play Mouse, one of our skater friends who's been around for a long time. You can actually she's your character.
So you can play as the Dairyland Dolls, and there is like one of the settings or the worlds. It's like a Dairyland or like a barn theme,
like a farmyard.
It's really weird, but it's great. Oh man, I cannot remember the name, but now I'm sure.
I just looked it up. It's Jam City Roller Girls, and it looks awesome.
Hey Kaylee, can we play this?
This really does have Mario Kart item boxes.
Totally. Yep. Like so. Play that, and keep in mind, also not real roller derby rules.
No.
But for also Mario Kart isn't real racing in real life racing, but it's racing, and it's, I would say, better racing.
Unfortunately, this is a WiiWare game, which means you can no longer play it.
Well, that sucks, and it's gone forever. Hope you have Wii Shop points left.
I know someone who just has it somewhere. Well, we'll look into it.
I was going to say, I might have an old Wii somewhere that has it on it. We'll see.
All right, so
probably not, but
my answer to the question of the week, I actually hadn't thought of one until now, but my answer is the lightning bolt that makes everyone small. Yes. So suddenly it's Tiny Derby.
Yes! I forgot about that one. That would be great.
Tiny Squeaky Derby.
That is good. That is
on a
pretty
giant
good.
track. It would be great.
Yep. That's kind of like Junior Derby sometimes.
No, they're good though, man.
No, they're good. I'm just saying some of them are tiny.
Yeah. So it's even more challenging, not like for them and their blocking and target zones.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, it's so good. So good. I like all of your answers.
Those are great.
And if you have an answer to this question, be sure to give it to us. We like to feature our favorite answer from every question of the week in the next episode. So be sure to give us answers. This week, we had like 5 or 6 really, really good question of the week answers, and it was the hardest pick we've ever had to make. You'll see which one we picked coming up. That being said, I think that's all of the podcast. Thank you two so much. This has been such a great episode. So
thank you.
If people wanted to see, more of you two, more of your podcast, of your derby league, your teams, where can they find all of that?
In terms of our league, MadisonRollerDerby.org is going to be the best place for you to go and get all the information for our league.
We were formerly called the Mad Rollin' Dolls. So you can also find us on Twitter at Mad Rollin' Dolls, no G. And our Twitter feed is pretty delightful as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of us, the best bet is to go check out our podcast, the Something Something Derby podcast. We're on Podbean, so I think it's ssrollerderby.podbean.com. And then we're on Facebook and we're on Twitter, and you can subscribe on iTunes, and we would love it if you did that and checked us out and rated us and all that good stuff. I am on Twitter. You can also, I'm happy to have people interact with me there at Millbot, which is MILLBOT.
I think I'm also on Twitter. I'm not on it very often. I might be Wendy Gator on it.
You have an Allie Gator account.
Oh, I'm Allie Gator. Who
You're
knew?
like Allie Gator 18. I think they even linked it
I'm
in
18
their promo.
FT. Yay! Yeah. You can tell I only go on it usually around the time of tournaments when I'm be like, who talking about stuff?
Yep.
Are you talking about people nicely? Okay.
Okay, I'm good. So yeah, we're online. Come check us out. You can find out about the podcast at all the social medias and stuff, and we would love that, and interact with us there. And I think that about sums it up.
Yeah.
Cool. So be sure to take a listen to SS Roller Derby. I'm probably going to go take a listen to it. Sounds pretty hecking cool. But if you liked this podcast that we're currently on right now, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/settingtherecordqueer. Patrons can get early guest reveals, a special exclusive patron Discord channel, high quality episode downloads, and even early episodes. Or if you're really, really generous, you can get special thanks from us on every episode of the podcast. In addition to helping us monetarily, you can also help us in a lot of other ways. If you liked this podcast, please leave a review on your podcast platform, on iTunes, on Stitcher, whatever it may be. Please tell a friend about us. Please talk about us on social media. You can find us on Twitter at STRQueercast. That's a great place to talk about us. We're super active there. You can also get in touch with us there on Twitter at settingtherecordqueer@gmail.com for email. And bit.ly/STRQcord is our Setting the Record Queer community Discord, where you can hang out with Kaylee and I, a bunch of our listeners, and a bunch of our guests, too, have decided to grace us with their presence. So, yeah. Get in contact with us, talk about us. If you have feedback or ideas, if you have an idea for what or who could be on this podcast, or if you think you'd be a good fit for this podcast, please get in touch with us. We're always looking for new cool episodes to do. There's so many cool people in this community. It's great.
Yay.
We have, for the past couple of months, we've had episodes scheduled out way in advance, and it's kind of incredible. There's just so many cool people that we want to talk about. So our logo was drawn by Cubotic. That's at QBTIC on Twitter, or Cobot, QOBOT.tumblr.com. Our theme music was made by Thrill Me Music. You can find more information about her work at thrillmemusic.squarespace.com. This podcast was edited by Kaylee and produced by yours truly, or Alexis. Yours truly, Alexis, not yours truly, or Alexis, was not produced. Anyways, also, one thing that we totally should have talked about at the beginning of this podcast that, Kaylee, we completely forgot about. We're going to be doing a live episode at Awesome Games Done Quick 2019. So Awesome Games Done Quick 2019 is one of our big speedrunning events, and they have panels. And so we're going to be doing a live speedrunning roundtable episode with RAL, who is staff for Power Up with Pride, the speedrunning event that we mentioned earlier, Brosencha, who runs the Kuso Grande Bad Video Game Speedrunning Tournament, and Seraph IV, who is an extremely talented graphic designer in our community. We're going to be sitting down with all of them in front of a real live audience to do this podcast. So if you're at AGDQ, besides, come finding us, come watch our panel. The schedule for that is to be announced. More information at gamesdonequick.com. The episode will be released also after. We'll get it out in audio form so you can listen to it if you weren't at the event. Kaylee, where can the people find you?
People can find me on Twitter at Witches Hex, that's WITCHS Hex, or on Twitch at the same name with an underscore between Witches and Hex.
And you can find me on Twitch and YouTube as Proto Magical Girl, or Twitch at proto.ml. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Princess Proto. Last week, our favorite answer to last week's Kaylee's question of the week, which was, if you had a superpower with an activation cost, what would the activation cost be? We don't care about the superpower. Came from Snovix in Discord, who said, my activation cost would be that I can only activate my powers when I sincerely accept a compliment about myself. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you again in 2 weeks. Setting the Record Queer, signing off. Bye-bye.
Bye.